Exile Records.
It's more than a month. Hopefully means it's our family. Lockdown of towns everywhere. Uga ulioje kuona jinsi gani tunaumia. Maelfu ya watu kwa Mola wameshatangulia.
It's time we need to stand together as one. It's time we need to stand together as humanity.
Keep your hope and faith alive. Dunia kunwa gifin, anina kula sawa ya jamaa, ya jamaa.
Kanita Indonesla, I know doctor. Jisim Taki Sukun, I know doctor. Kanita Indugoha, I know doctor.
Elastic sound,
I know doctor.
Yeah. Maintain 1 meter away. Wash hands and please stay. Sokola maboko na yo
before you touch your face.
Mubikurikize, dufate corona nije kure. Dufate na maboko, ungasi wachuna turandure. Turi bamwe, abavandimwe.
Yatapita, yatapita, yatapita.
If I compare COVID-19 and war, COVID-19 is more dangerous than war.
This virus, it's pandemic. That means it's attacking everyone from anywhere.
We are strong. We can go through this.
The only way we can overcome corona, wash your hands with soap. It's by hope, peace and love. The only way we can overcome corona, wash your hands with soap.
We have positive things from refugee camp, like telling the world that this is who we are, and not everyone in a refugee camp can tell their story. So I feel great, like being a voice to the voiceless.
It's like that light in the morning when the sun rises. It shines a lot and it kind of like illuminates all of the area. So by telling one story, I'm able to shine a light on that person. That's what I love about telling story. I kind of feel like I've brought someone from the dark and I've brought them to the light.
Good morning. How are you? Wherever in the world you are joining us from, welcome to this morning's panel. My name is Pinky Gelani. And remember, if you are interacting with us, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, make sure you just let us know where you are watching from. The reason I am moderating today is because I am involved with UNHCR. I am a high-profile supporter of UNHCR and just amazed to see what refugees come up with every time. I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about FilmAid. This year, FilmAid is hosting the first of its kind, the online students exhibition, as you've seen, from the 15th until 19th of September, a sneak peek of the annual film festival that will be held in November this year. This year's theme is Visions of the World We Desire. This year's festival showcases young filmmakers who offer a vision for the collective future, where all people can live dignified lives free from violence, bigotry, inequality, and oppression. This digital exhibition is hosted on virtual platforms. This is the world we live in today, such as Facebook, of course, YouTube, and Zoom, including the valued participation of refugees and other stakeholders in Kakuma and Dadaab refugee camps and Kalubaye settlement, as well as from other young filmmakers across Kenya. Through virtual roundtables, FilmAid's unique film festival also opens opportunities for young refugee filmmakers to collaborate with media, film, and humanitarian experts in discussions that will be open to a wider public within and outside Kenya. Like I said, wherever in the world you are joining us from, welcome. I'm just going to give you some guidelines on how we are doing things this morning. I will introduce our panel to you. I shall just give a quick introduction, and then I will go into each panelist's biography. So our first panelist who will be speaking this morning, we have, of course, the very distinguished and very lovely Miss Ivana Unluova. I hope I've said that correctly. Our second panelist, of course, Mr. Jeshan Awar from the Refugees Affairs Secretariat, and Mr. Bapwatch Omot from, he is a FilmAid media student. We are also awaiting Dr. Willie Mutunga to join us. He is from the board of FilmAid Kenya. And I understand he's having power problems. Hey, this is Kenya. And these things do happen, unfortunately. Happens all over the world, I understand. So hopefully he will be joining us. We are asking each of our panelists to remain on mute until they get an opportunity to speak. But please, if you have any questions for them, please do type them in and send them in. And remember to let us know where you are sending in your questions from. Give us your name so that we can give you a mention as well. Just a reminder to our panelists, we have about 15 to 20 minutes each on you, so you can have a conversation with our viewers today. Our viewers are refugees and asylum seekers. We have artists and activists who are joining us, Kenyan citizens, policymakers, and of course, anybody who is interested in film around the international community. So I will now go into the bios of each of our panelists. Our first speaker today, as I mentioned earlier, is Miss Ivana Unluova. She is the assistant representative with UNHCR, and she joined UNHCR in Kenya in December 2016, following 5 years with the operation in the capacity of senior program officer. Between 2008 and 2011, she was the manager of the Common Humanitarian Fund with UN OCHA, OCHA, Somalia. In her other assignments with UNHCR since 1997, she served in program management capacity with UNHCR Somalia and Tanzania, as well as the external relations function with UNHCR Europe. The Bureau, including the Kosovo operation. Prior to joining UNHCR, Ms. Unluova has worked with the government of Norway, the Directorate for Immigration, as Senior Executive for Local Integration and also voluntary return programming for refugees. So welcome, Ms. Unluova. Our second panelist today, of course, is Mr. Jashon Kinoro Owor. He is a Senior Assistant Secretary and Administration in the Refugee Affairs Secretariat, and he has been this since 2018. He has a career in civil service, of course, with over 26 years experience, and has worked with the Ministries of Information, the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Water and Environment. He was also the Secretary and National Environment Tribunal for over 10 years before joining RAS. He holds a BA in Administration, and that's from the University of Nairobi, as well as an MBA of Management from JKUAT. So welcome, Mr. Owor. We're still awaiting Dr. Mutunga to join us. Hopefully he will do so soon. But of course, our third panelist, who was actually first here this morning, Mr. Bapwatch Omot Oman. Bapwatch is an Ethiopian poet hailing from the Gambela region in Western Ethiopia. He fled into Kenya's Dadaab refugee camp when his village was attacked by gunmen in 2003. He found a deviation through poetry, and he found it as a form of storytelling, but it was not easy in the beginning because he did suffer stage fright. His former teacher, Mr. Oju, in Ifo camp, helped him overcome his fears when he recruited him in the drama club. He has performed his poetry in various stages, winning many audiences by capturing emotions and receiving admiration for his artistic use of words to talk about issues affecting his community. Bapwatch, of course, as I said before, is a student of the FilmAid media training program where he studies film. So now let's get straight into it. Miss Ivana, I would like to talk to you first. And I think you do have some notes that you'd like to share with us this morning. But Kenya, of course, has been hosting refugees for decades. Today, I think almost half a million refugees and asylum seekers, mainly living in Kakuma refugee camp and Kalubaye settlement in Turkana County and the Dadaab refugee camps in Garissa County. Maybe you'd like to expound a little bit more on this and tell us about the UNHCR's involvement.
Yes, thank you very much, Pinky. Good morning, colleagues on the panel. Good morning, everybody in the general public who may be watching us, listening to us. Yes, indeed, the Kenya refugee operation is, as you know, one of the oldest ones in the world. Kenya has been hosting refugees for almost 3 decades. And as you said, Pinky, we have close to 500,000. Unfortunately, again, because at some point in time, a few years back, we were down to close to 450,000, and the numbers are unfortunately again growing. And predominantly, as you said, we have refugees in Kakuma and Kalubaye, which is Turkana West sub-county, and then we have refugees in Dadaab, which of course is one of the most famous or notorious refugee camps in the world. And then we have roughly 80,000 of so-called urban refugees. Those are the ones who, in principle, can sustain themselves and who can, reside outside of the camps and who live predominantly in Nairobi or in other urban centers in Nakuru, Eldoret, and also on the coast in Mombasa, for example. As I said, our operation is one of the oldest ones in the world. And we have, despite the bit of an increase that we have had recently in the year or two, we have dropped down, so to speak, to the 5th largest operation on the continent of Africa. And we are now, I think, number 11 globally. It tells you also how difficult and how grave really the global refugee situation is. Because if we, with roughly 500,000 refugees, are now only number 11 in the global you know, in on the global ladder, so to speak, it tells you really that the numbers of refugees are through the roof globally. And it's no secret that, and we have just issued, our office has just issued actually a statement, I think yesterday or earlier this week, about the severe funding shortages that the UNHCR globally is being faced with. Of course, it is all now in the new context of COVID, which has had very, very grave financial implications on the global economy, and then double so in the countries like Kenya, middle income or lower income countries that actually host currently 85% of the global refugee caseload. So we have all seen it, you know, in Kenya, and we are reading it in the newspapers every day and seeing it everywhere, that the economic impact of the pandemic has been very, very severe. And you can imagine that in you know, in a country like ours, I mean, like Kenya, the impact on those who are working, especially in the informal sector, is also then translating or appearing in very similar way, and possibly even double so, on the refugee youth. What you could see from the initial video that you were streaming, which I think was really excellent, and with the music really beautiful and capturing really the spirit of Kakuma, you could see it that the population is youth. We have, it's close to 70% of our population who are really young people below 24. If we go, you know, to below 18, it is something like 54%. And those are children who go, you know, to pre-primary and primary. So it's really, the camps are predominantly young people. There's a lot of energy, there's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of hope. The current situation must not really result in us stopping all the good work that we have been able to achieve, you know, working hand in hand, of course, with the Kenyan government and also with both at the central level, and you will hear later Mr. Obor from the Refugee Affairs Secretariat, but also with the counties. And this is where we have really focused in the past, well, I would say since 2016, definitely, although we started a little bit before that, but since 2016, really trying to work with the county governments on maximizing on the positive contribution that the refugee camps can really make or are making already to the economy of the local communities and also to the well-being of the local communities. And you may know that Kakuma has become a subject of very many, well, several very important studies that really contributed to the global shift of the way the humanitarian community and UNHCR, of course, as the mandated leader and coordinator of the refugee response, is trying to address the needs of refugees. And that is the shift towards focus on solutions and on integration and inclusion of refugees within the national or local structures wherever possible and wherever the governments, of course, are able to support it. So, so as I said, in Kakuma, we started back in 2016. We have an area-based plan in place, Kalobea Socioeconomic Integrated Plan, which we have been now trying to replicate also on the Garissa side to include the Dadaab refugee camp and the and the areas around, and the focus of both of these plans, and of course on the Kakuma side we are far more advanced than in Dadaab, has really been on including refugees on one hand side in the services that that are provided, the national services, either if they are devolved or not. For example, education, looking also at water provision, although there we have not made as much progress as we would like. Looking at bringing a private sector, because that is something that is really important to support the refugees who graduate from schools and who then find themselves basically in a well, one could call it a vacuum or situation of no hope or no prospects, no future. So, of course, with the support of donors, and we have been fortunate enough to secure quite early on in these efforts funding from the European Union that supported us in Calobeye, together, of course, with other donors, because others then followed using the European Union's funding as a catalyst. We have been really trying to shift the operation towards doing something meaningful on the side of, you know, the post-school period for the youth that we have in the camps. Really supporting entrepreneurship, trying to support individual talents, and to support finally private sector. And focusing especially on Kenyan private sector, because we know the private sector in Kenya is extremely vibrant and really stands for a number of very important innovations. So that has been really the focus, and through our, especially in the past couple of years, and through our work with World Bank, with IFC, we, despite the pandemic, quite recently, it's now what 3 months ago, we have been able to launch the Kakuma and Kalobeye Challenge Fund, which is going to, the aim is, and we hope that it will really materialize, work as a catalyst for bringing the private sector and get them to establish within the refugee hosting area and really work both for the benefit of the local populations and refugees. And this is, as I said, the most important step, which hopefully now can bring us further in all our efforts in really maximizing on the positive impact that the refugee presence has on the hosting areas. If I go back to the services, and I mentioned that we are working both with the central government and the county government on inclusion of refugees in the services. I would say probably, okay, we have gotten farthest actually in the sector of health, because for a number of years now, we have been able to enroll our urban refugees into the National Health Insurance Scheme. And we are paying, and some refugees are paying on their own, from their own resources, the national health insurance, the premium, and they are able to access the services in the same way as Kenyans. We are now trying to transfer this experience to the camps. We are starting with Kakuma and Kalobeye. And of course, we have been delayed now by the pandemic by some months, but we are firmly on the path to accomplish that. And it's very clear that when the refugees will be able to contribute, you know, through payment of the premiums to the health insurance fund, obviously they will contribute to the growth of the fund. So it can be a win-win situation also in that sector. Now, the last sector I want to mention, and I know I'm running out of time, is education. Because, as I said, with the youth, the huge youth group that we have in our camps, the education is really, I mean, the alpha omega of whatever we do, because it provides the protection, it provides the, you know, the structure to the day, and most importantly, it provides hope. It provides future. And our refugees are so clear on that. They understand that the way out of the situation in which they find themselves temporarily is to do well at school and to advance through education. So we are very grateful really to the Kenyan government that one of the 3 pledges that they made at the Global Refugee Forum last year, it's now 9 months, it's going to be soon 1 year in December, to really include refugees in the international education policy. that we have been able, despite the pandemic, to progress. Clearly, there is a number of donors who are supporting these efforts. World Bank, I mean, many governments who are also part of the World Bank's board. And so it is an effort which is obviously not going to come gratis, but a very important effort, which will mean that, again, the refugees will no longer be only in the schools that we currently are running and managing. The current institutions, I don't want to create a wrong impression here, so let me just explain this. The current schools that we have in the camps, they are registered as examination centers. Our children are able to sit for Kenyan exams. Many of them do supremely well. We normally have amongst the top candidates a couple of our refugee children every single year. And the schools are also, I mean, in our schools, we have Kenyan teachers who teach, in addition to our refugee teachers whom we, try to support in increasing their education and so on. So, but we want something more. We want for the children, the refugee children, to be recognized as in the same way as the Kenyan children, and be counted, so to speak, in the mainstream Kenyan education. And they have been working really hand in hand with, of course, as I said, with donors, with partners such as UNICEF, and with the Ministry of Education. And we are really, really grateful for the progress that we have been able to make over the past, especially couple of years. And we are almost there. Yeah, I think I'm running already over time, but just to say that we are, despite the pandemic, and I started on a little bit gloomy note, talking about the economic impact of COVID, which of course we cannot sort of leave out or neglect or pretend it's not there. And we are, as a matter of fact, bracing ourselves for an extremely, extremely tough year in 2021. But at the same time, I really have to be happy, and especially as a head of operations in Kenya, I have to be, I really want to express my happiness about that we have not dropped the ball, so to speak, on all the progressive agenda that we have as UNHCR globally, and as the, the refugee community. And that together with the government, despite the challenges that we are faced with now, with the pandemic on top of everything, that we are progressing. Yeah, so let me end there, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Unluova. I've asked everyone to keep their questions until about 12:30, which we will get into a Q&A. But I think you've said some amazing things there. I like that you ended it on a height. And I think, the way that you talked about integration and inclusion, it's very important. I think a refugee at the end of the day just wants to live with dignity, and the more they get involved in the country that they live in, then I think the more the dignity does come in. So thank you so much for your sentiments, and thank you for that. Thank you for shedding light on what you're doing. And of course, the pandemic is affecting everyone across the globe. And, like you said, it's tougher with what work you're trying to do. And, you are appealing to the private sector to support you in all sorts of ways. And I know that can be an uphill task, but keep doing what you're doing. I'd just like to recognize our fourth panelist who's come in this morning. Before I ask him to speak, I'll just give a brief bio for Dr. Willie Mutunga. Welcome, Dr. Willie Mutunga, of course, is the former Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court of Kenya. He's a reform activist, and he recently served as the Commonwealth Secretary General's Special Envoy to the Maldives. He joined the law faculty at the University of Nairobi as a lecturer and received his doctorate from the Osgood Hall Law School in Toronto. Dr. Mutunga helped launch the Kenya Human Rights Commission and later served as its executive director. Currently, he serves as a distinguished scholar in residence at the Leitner Center for International Law and Justice at the Fordham Law School. Dr. Mutunga received his bachelor's from the University of Nairobi and his master's from the University of Dar es Salaam. Welcome, Dr. Mutunga, and thank you for joining us this morning. Maybe you can give us a bit more of your sentiments and share your take on the way the governments here in Kenya and globally have responded to the pandemic so far, and the biggest lessons that we are learning about humanity and human rights.
Right. Yeah. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're talking about humanity and human rights. We're talking about refugees. We're talking about a planet that is very inhuman. And this is reflected very clearly when you look at how the pandemic has been the cause of protectionism, countries making sure that people don't migrate to those those countries, racist policies and so forth. But there are other good stories. I think the Kenyan one, where the refugee bill, went through the second reading in July 2020, and I also been informed that Ethiopia's 2019 refugee proclamation recognizes refugees' right to work and freedom of movement. But if we look at the pandemic holistically, and we basically look at the individual countries, what you see is that unit of opposites, great concern for humanity, but there is the inward looking also in some countries, to carry out politics that they have always wanted to carry out, because crisis, as history records, crisis test humanity, whether it's war, whether it's pandemic, whether it's earthquakes or whatever. And human beings respond differently, societies respond differently. If you look at that history, you see that the crisis is not different. And we have, since we are talking about the refugees today, we've got to go, of course, beyond the refugees. If you are talking about how Kenya has dealt with the pandemic, the refugees are included in our population, in the communities where they live. And I must say, I have been shocked, by my government's response to this, pandemic. If we go beyond the refugees, you see the constitution, which has a very progressive provision on economic, social, and cultural rights, Article 43, which talks about the right to food, housing, the right to security, right to education, right to health. When you look at what has happened during that particular period, it's shocking. It's shocking. It's very, very, very inhuman, where instead of the central government and the county government pooling resources, to deal with pandemic, what we have seen is something that is different, where people are told to wash hands, and yet there's no water. When in this country we know that waters, the reason there's no water is because the cartels, the so-called the clean water tanks that we see every day, are the ones that are actually the cause of it. And what the government could have done, in my view, quite literally, is to unblock the pipes and make sure that water flows into the slum areas and so forth, even if it's for a few months. Then it makes sense when you tell people to wash hands. It makes sense. You give them soap, you buy them masks. If there is a lockdown, you find out how you're going to feed them. But this hasn't crossed, I'm sorry to say, hasn't crossed the minds of our government and our political leaders. And what then recently we now engaged in this talk about the COVID billionaires and millionaires. I don't know whether I don't have the facts. Okay, so I'm just talking about what is in the social media, what is in the papers. And so if that is true, is there greater inhumanity, like that, where corruption, comes in and resources don't go where they're supposed to, to go. So looking at the world also, I see the same pattern where there's growing inequality, there's growing intolerance, there's growing, racism, politics of division all over the place. And I think that's going forward, that's what should engage all of us from our own focus on refugees, because that's where humanity is actually tested. And I think I want to stop there. That's that was just my comments on that issue.
I think those are very powerful comments, and I think very valid as well. When you're talking about the sort of planet we're living on, and how crisis tests humanity, and the crisis that we're seeing that nobody saw coming. But of course, it's how our government or our leaders have acted and reacted. So, very interesting, very valid points. I'd like to now ask Mr. Awar maybe to say a few words in regards to what you are thinking and how you're presenting today.
Thank you very much, Madam Pinky, for having me. And thank you everyone else who is here this afternoon. My name is Jason Award from Refugee Affairs Secretariat. Now, I'm just going to talk briefly about what Refugee Affairs has done and the challenges we have faced during this COVID period. As Madam Unova had put it correctly, Kenya has been hosting refugees for a very, very long time. And the pattern changed, I think, sometime in early 90s when our neighboring country, Somali, broke down. And that's when we started getting a huge influx of refugees into the country. And since then, we have been dealing with refugee cases. Right now, we have a refugee population of about heading towards 500,000 in this country. And as has been mentioned before, some are in the camps, others are in urban areas. We have two camps, basically. We have Kakuma, and then we have Dadaab. As we talk now, Dadaab, the government is planning to close down Dadaab. So it is only Kakuma, which is operational, though there are also activities going on in Dadaab. So during this COVID period, we have witnessed quite a number of challenges. We have seen a reduced number in new arrivals, more so from March all through towards August this year. And this was basically because of the restrictions which were put by the government, both locally and internationally. And so it was very difficult for them to travel. And this also attributed to the scaled down registration services we normally offer to our refugees, so that those who manage to come in are not yet registered. But very soon, when things normalizes, then we will start registration. Again, it has been very difficult for refugees to move in and out of the camps. In fact, the movement was stopped. And this probably made it rather difficult for them to get some essential services which are not offered in the camps, like medication and all that. Again, there's been loss of livelihoods. You know, the pandemic really affected the small economic sectors, and most of these refugees normally operate small businesses, and these businesses have been really affected. And as Madam Unlova put it, we're really appealing to donors in this situation to come up and help. UNHCR is really trying hard to help, but given that even the global basket has been reduced, and so the effect comes down, and the government and UNHCR alone cannot actually make ends meet, so to speak. So we are appealing to donors to come up and help in this situation. Again, during this difficult period of COVID infection, humanitarian activities with the camps also reduced drastically, because even UN partners who have been operating in the camps were also affected. They could not visit the camps. And so again, essential services refugees used to get have been stopped. And it is quite a challenging environment for them. Another challenge is that in cases of secondary movement, where refugees want to move to some other countries again to seek for asylum, those ones were also stopped. And that included also resettlement of refugees to third countries. The government stopped that because there were no movement in and out of the country. Repatriation is also another part of our activity which has been affected by the COVID-19. Since March, we have not repatriated any refugees. We normally do. Repatriation has been happening between Kenya and Somali, Kenya and Ethiopia, Kenya and Burundi. But since March this year, all these have stopped, and we hope that when things normalizes, then we will pick up from there. Now, Madam Unov also talked about KISDEP and GISDEP, and this was a program by the government and UNHCR to ensure that both refugees and the host communities live harmoniously, so that they feel part and parcel of the community. They are not isolated. It is not like they are in their own separated camps where they feel discriminated against. It is a program where they are brought together, they share schools, they share hospitals, they share businesses together. It is a village where they see each other as human beings, regardless of where they have come from. And in doing this, they are enjoying all the services and benefits, both the county government and the national government are providing. In terms of health, as Madam Unlova correctly put it, some have already been registered with our national insurance providers, and they can now visit our hospitals. There are no particular hospitals for refugees. We treat them as our own, our friends, our fellow human beings, and so they get the service. They get the services which each and every Kenyan gets. In terms of education, she also mentioned that one. And right now, refugee pupils go to government schools, and there is no curriculum for refugees. They use our curriculum and they excel. I remember one time when the president wanted to meet excellent pupils and one of them was a refugee, they went to State House and they were treated like any other student who has performed well and congratulated by the president. So we allow them as far as their ability can take them. They go up to university and they get all the services Kenyans can get. Otherwise, I can stop there and wait for any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Awar. I will come back to you with more questions as, you brought up some very intriguing points and we would like you to expound on them. It's very interesting how you talk about secondary movement and how it's been affected by the pandemic. Of course, the resettlement of refugees, the repatriation of refugees, all very essential and very difficult in 2020. I'd now like to ask Mr. Bapwatch, who is our student at FilmAid, to come and say a few words and talk about his experience. Over to you, Mr. Bapwatch.
Thank you so much, Pinky, for giving me this chance to speak. Talking about myself first, like back in 2013, in 2003, on December 13, our ethnic group, the Anuak, we were massacred from western part of Ethiopia. That's a region called Gambela. We were massacred. The tribesmen were targeted by the late and former Meles Zenawi, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia then, which left more than 424 men dead and mass graved. More than hundreds of women harassed. Then we were forced to journey to unknown land to seek refuge. That's how we ended here in Kenya, my family and I and other people. As put earlier, Kenya has been paradise to many and thousands of refugees. Kenya has been a paradise to many refugees. So having arrived here, we were given free things by UNHCR and the government of Kenya. We are grateful for that. We were taken to free schools. And through FilmAid, young refugees with talents are able to talk and pass messages to the world. I myself wrote a poem that's called Who's to Blame, which reached thousands of people as an artist, because we always have the same voice and we speak the same language as an artist. Here in the camp, like we have many people who are from different backgrounds. Like we have the Somalis, we have the South Sudanese, we have the Congolese people, we have people from Rwanda who are almost affected by the same thing. Maybe it's a war. This is almost one factor that brought us here to the camp. And when you look at the fellow that is suffering from the same thing, that's when we decided, or I decided to come up with the same piece that is talking about, or maybe eradicating what in human act can do, what in humanity needs. That's why we artists globally, we speak one language. Like currently there is an ongoing issue or ongoing talent that is being practiced in the camps, both Kakuma and Dadaab here. We are interconnected and joined. We as artists here in Kenya or refugee camps, we do theater show. Like I am a thespian. I do theater act. I act apart from poem. So what we do or what we showcase to the community is what it's really affecting us as refugees or as people with needs. So when we are showing these things to the communities, it means we are preventing some more things from, or dangerous things from happening. But currently there's a pandemic that is affecting everyone globally. So all these activities or the shows were altered or are altered by this pandemic. But because of that, we cannot stop educating the communities. We keep on doing that through music, through poems, and then we show them to the communities. And FilmAid International in Kenya is helping us do that. Like through FilmAid, we are able to record some of the pieces that we create, so that we give it to the community for them to get it. And then we also write magazines and we publish them through FilmAid as well, to warn and educate the community. As a journalist, as a media student, I've written a certain story about a young refugee, actually, who is currently using her talent or the skills she has gotten from DRC to make home bar soaps. She makes masks and then give it out to the needy refugees. So this story encourages all the refugees to not like fully depend on humanitarian agencies, because there are some things that will force them, or some circumstances that will force them not to maybe give assistance that they really want to, like this one now of the pandemic. But when we are able to utilize the skills and abilities that we have, like what Achille is doing, producing home bar soaps and making masks to give it to the needy refugees who cannot or who are unable to make for themselves. And UNHCR and other agencies are unable also to reach them, to help them, not because they are not willing to help, but because they are being forced by circumstances not to. Then we are therefore able to help ourselves as refugees who have gone through skills and training vocational of skills. So all the agencies that are responsible or are able to give us the skills or teach us the skills, like FilmAid now is doing that one through media. We do encourage them to really go on with their projects, because these things will really help us in the future. Like now, if we can tell the story of one refugee, it means you are telling the story of many and thousands of refugees globally. Because what is affecting us is always global. So I would also urge the Kenya government, who has been paradise to us, thousands of refugees, to also continue supporting us in whichever field they can. So organizations and donors who are supporting refugees, on behalf of thousands of refugees, I would like to say thank you for supporting us in these situations that we are in. talking artistically, CNN will be featuring some of the best artist show from Kakuma refugee camp today, East African time. That is from, I think, sorry, excuse, from 1:30. CNN will be featuring artist work, best some of the talents from Kakuma refugee camp, East African time, 7:30, no, 1:30 and 3:30. So you need to tune in to watch and know that refugees have talent. And this status called refugee does not hinder them, or the circumstances or the obstacles in the camp will not stop refugees from using their talents to reach the world and educate the world. Refugees have obstacles, but yes, it does not mean that we really need to succumb to them. We are pushing forward as refugees and as artists to use it and give our views to the world as well. So Pinky, back to you. In case of any questions, I'll be ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bapwatch. What a harrowing experience for you to have fled your own country after seeing what you saw. And you know, it's very interesting to hear that FilmAid has been such a huge help, especially because there are so many youth in regards to refugees, and FilmAid has sort of stepped in and been able to, you know, allow the youth to do what they do best, which is create. So it's very interesting that FilmAid is allowing, you know, people to grow themselves in regards to media and journalism, writing and filmmaking. I just want to ask a question to Dr. Mutunga. When you hear something like refugees saying Kenya has been a paradise to many, and then on the flip side, you know, you were talking about the COVID millionaires and the COVID billionaires and that controversy. What would you say? Is Kenya really a paradise?
Well, let me say what Bamwatch said, you know, warmed my heart and made me very proud, you know, as a Kenyan. I mean, saying Kenya is a paradise for refugees, and that is his experience, all right? It's great for Kenyans to, you know, to hear, okay? Because we focus on negative things most of the time. And it's always good to have people like Bapwatch, who has been here, describe us, you know, that way. And so I think it's in that context that we keep on urging, you know, our government, you know, to do better. And I don't want to debate that. I'm sure people in the slum areas, people who are hungry and so forth, they will say, this has been our hell, for a long time. But when he said it, I was very happy, because it shows that, and I talked about the refugee, bill that is being discussed. It's for me, it's an eye opener in the sense that as we criticize our government, we've got also to look at, the positive things that are being done, because we might not see them, and that's the nature of humanity also. You look at the cup and you say it's half full, right? That's what you see. So that will be my reaction. And it's something that Bapwatch I'm going to put on Twitter and then see how the debate pans out. Okay.
That'll be an interesting debate to actually watch.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, Bapwatch, did you have something to add?
I was to say, like, I'll wait for the reactions, like, because, like, not looking only on the negative sides of, as mentioned by Doctor, not only looking at the negative sides, we also have positive sides from the government, like, because I'm from a country where I was unable to exercise my rights. I cannot speak like this one. There's some poems that I did that won the best last year. I won like under the judges category of best piece of mind, a poem that talks about who is to blame. I was not like writing it to win something, but I was writing it to tell the story of what happened to me and some other colleagues. But then it happened that I won something out of it. But then if I am only to write that thing in my country, I would have not maybe be where I am today. That's why I call Kenya paradise to many. And for that, we are able to exercise some of the talent, some of the rights that we can now enjoy here in Kenya. But back at home, we cannot enjoy those rights.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bapwatch. Remember, if you are watching from wherever in the world, please send in your questions. I do see some questions coming in, which we will get to in a short while. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what your name is so we can acknowledge you right here on this platform. Ms. Unluova, I'd like to ask you a question. When you see a student like Bapwatch and him talking about the upside and him talking about the positivity, how does it make you feel as UNHCR?
Yeah, it's obviously one of the I would call it success stories that we have. And, you know, it highlights the, okay, I don't want to get very philosophical about this because this is really a big discussion that is happening also within the organization and of course, you know, with all our partners and so on. But it highlights the need to have, you know, the programming, basically the way we design and implement our projects and the assistance, provided in such a way that it can support the individual talents, that it can support the individual's dreams and hopes. And it is something very difficult, you know, because the programs in the refugee camps, which, and you were running at some point the photo, or I think you have it on the advert for this event, the photo of a typical refugee camp, of course, and you see sort of the massive, you know, you see the masses of people and you see sort of the massive layout of a camp. So the balance between providing, you know, assistance, support that covers all the 500,000 refugees, and at the same time to have programs that are able to nurture and support individual talents or individual hopes and treat people as individuals, because we all want to be treated not as a part of a 500,000 community. We want to be treated as an individual with all our, you know, all our dreams and hopes are valid, right? So to have this kind of balance within, you know, our programs, it's extremely difficult. It is extremely difficult and it costs a lot of money. Let me be very frank about it. Because whenever you want to do something in a way that can help people like Bapwatch, or we have others, I mean, who have gone to Princeton University, who have gone to other places in the world, or have just made it here in Kenya as entrepreneurs. You know, so to do something that can really meaningfully help them, it's very difficult in the middle of the sort of the mass programming that we need to have, because we are there, of course, first and foremost to provide the first the emergency response, you know, the life-saving activities, the water, health, education, and so on, and then to look at the little bit extra, and this is what we now call the solutions programming, which really should be focusing more and more on this individual approach and finding, or at least be able to program for on a smaller scale for smaller groups that need a little bit more targeted support, you know, that can bring them forward. Like, for example, the group of refugee athletes who also originated from Kakuma and who finally comprised a bigger half of the group of refugee athletes who went to Rio some years back. And we are currently training again a group of refugee athletes for going to Tokyo if Tokyo ever happens. You know, so to be able to do something like that, that we sort of narrow, or within the mass of 500,000, we are able to do some small targeted, you know, support interventions that can get these, well, I call them kids because most of them are young people and kids, that can get these kids going and get them forward in life and in the world. This is very important, and this is what our biggest fear is now going forward, that we will lose the ability to do that because we will lose the donor support. And of course, as a result of the, you know, of the impact of COVID on the economic situation globally. And this is really where we need to continue appealing to our donors and to all our well-wishers, and also to private sector, not for charities, but for their support and coming and establishing themselves in the camps, and to see really the breadth of experience and the talent that we have there, and the possibility of really growing their own business models with the capacity that we have there available. So I think this is really going to be, so to say, the crux of the matter, especially next year, when we, by all accounts and intents, are going to be faced with a decline in our funding, and we will have to really see if we are able to continue with some kind of these niche programs that we have been able to foster so far. And I really hope that we will be able to do it, because really the main thing is to, I mean, I'm repeating it, but really to be able to focus at least a little bit on the individuals and to support them to get forward, because it gives hope then to the larger community, you know, and it has a lot to say for the overall atmosphere in the camps, the overall mental health in the camps, because otherwise the camps could be a place of hopelessness. And this is what we don't want. We are coming from there. We are trying to get away from there, because if we improve on the situation in the camps, you know, provide the hope to the young people that we have, people will not be going up north. You know, and Dr. Mutunga was talking about it. I mean, the countries in the north are closing. They are closing down even more than before, because they have their own economic troubles now with COVID. Their, you know, their packages to bail out their own industries and so on. So, so nobody is waiting for anybody to come from Africa, you know. So really, the job for us is to, we call it to provide the protection and the solutions in the region. It is, you can say it's a fancy title, but behind it is precisely what I said, to give people hope and possibilities there where they are, not necessarily on a permanent basis, but for the interim when they are here, so that they can see a way forward for themselves in the life other than going to the Mediterranean, because that is not the way forward. Yeah, so I think I stop there. This is, for me, this is a really
it's a passion point, I can see.
This is a passion point, because I have been in Africa for 20 years and I deeply believe in the future of this continent. And I deeply believe that people, well, most at least, do not need to look for anything outside, that we can help for people to find their place here at home.
Yes.
Okay, I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those are some very interesting points. And I love the fact that you say that basically Africa can take care of its problems. We just need to believe in that. I have a comment here. So now we're going into the Q&A section of this panel discussion. So I'll first start with a comment that we've received online. FilmAid should have a platform to encourage the film journalism students to explore the digital spaces to tell their own stories. We would like to hear more inspiring stories from beneficiaries, like what Bapwatch talked about, a lady who makes masks. Also, how the pandemic in general has affected the refugee population in the camp on an individual level. Thank you so much for that comment. We appreciate it. And of course, the members of FilmAid who are here, including Dr. Willie Mutunga, will take that into consideration. All right, so Mr. Awar, we're going to come to you because we have a question for you from a former refugee who's based in the UK. And the question is, does RAS consider other models of refugee management that provide better rights for refugees, such as freedom of movement and to work? Sorry, Mr. Awar, you need to unmute. There you go.
Yes.
Do you need me to repeat the question, or are you okay?
I'm okay. Thank you very much for that question from a former refugee based in UK. Yes, as you are aware, right now we are domesticating the CRRF document, and I'm happy to say that Kenya is the first country to take that step in the region. And when it will be finalized, it will address all the concerns the former refugee is raising. And again, the refugee bill will also address many of these loopholes. As Dr. Mutunga had mentioned, it is in the third reading, and very soon it will be our working document. But apart from that, even right now, still, refugees can still move in and out of the camps. They are not in jail or concentration camps, so to speak. They are normally given movement passes when they want to move out to seek for essential services, which cannot be provided in the camps. Medical attention, business, students going to school, they are given movement passes. And even for business, we give work permit class M, which is free of charge. So refugees are also doing business and they can be given work permits. So they are not like in an enclosure where they cannot move, and they can move, but the government must know where they are at any given time, and that's why they are given movement passes, so that the security officers do not give them rough time when they're traveling along our roads.
Thank you so much, Mr. Awar. We're going to stay with you with our next question. It's from Sally, who says that you've talked about asylum-seeking resettlement and repatriation. What about integration with the local host populations? Do such mechanisms exist, and has the current pandemic affected it?
It was just that I did not mention it, but integration is also one of the three permanent solutions to refugee problems, and we allow it. And so in so many cases, we have tried to integrate those who do not want to go back, like from Dadaab. It has been very, very difficult to convince them to go back. And integration process and requests have been there, and we are trying to do our best. Again, because of this COVID issue, integration is a process. It is not a one-thing activity, one-time activity. And so, as she puts it, yes, it has been affected by this COVID situation. But when things will come back to normal, we will proceed, and whoever wants to be integrated, there's a procedure for that, and nobody will be turned down.
Thanks, Mr. Awar. Remember, wherever you are watching from, please do send us a message. Tell us where you're tuned in from. I've got some comments here. I'm tuning in from Kakuma, that's Ian Mwangi. Wesonga rather, is tuned in from the UK. Fardosa from Dadaab Refugee Camp. Paul Padiet, who's tuned in from Kakuma Refugee Camp. Isaac Sigala, who's tuned in from Nairobi. Thank you for joining us. We have a comment from Grace Murithi, who says that, I love the work that FilmAid is doing doing, empowering refugees to tell their stories freely and express themselves. Big up. We have a question to Omot, that's Bakwach, from Mihail Gabriel in Kakuma. I hope I've said your name correctly. You say, well done, Omot. My name is Mihail Deng. I'm also from Gambela and I live in Kakuma. From my experiences as a refugee youth advocate, I often encountered many young refugees who have lost the motivation to continue pushing for their dreams as a result of the numerous challenges that they face every day. How can people like myself and you help them reignite their inner spirit to enable them to overcome their trauma and thrive?
Thank you, Neil, for that question. First of all, you and me should not give up on these people or on such people. We should continue talking to them and encouraging them. Remember, these are people who are in the camps due to very different reasons. They're being traumatized, like for real. Some of them have lost their parents, their everything, and they're in the camps just by themselves. So they need thorough talks and too much like encouragement. Like there are some people whom I've also encountered here in the DAP. Like you tell them there's job advert, you tell them, you encourage them to apply, and then they feel like, I've been applying, then I don't get the job. But then that does not mean that I'll have to stop from maybe going to him whenever I see or I find job and advert. I'll still have to go and tell him that there's job advert. So me pushing him forward will mean that I am doing something, and then he will get tired. Out of that tiredness, it will apply like, I am tired of this guy talking to me always. Let me just drop my job application. See, you never know that is his turning point. You never know that he'll be called for the interview, and maybe he will be successful for that interview. Out of tiredness, remember, it will apply. Continue telling these people that these problems are universal. These problems we are facing are universal. It's not just like directly we, the refugees, are facing these problems alone. Someone like Bill Gates is also going through some problems in life. Us being refugees does not mean that we are the only people that are going through problems. First of all, you need to let them know that this name, it's just a status. This refugee, this word called refugee, it's just a status. Then we can and we will do anything that anyone else is doing in the world. We should not stop. We should continue talking to these people. They are going through a lot, Neil, brother, as you have said. People are going through a lot in the camp. But then people like you and me who understand that these problems are global, we should not rest. We need to change their thinking. We need to wake them up. We need to continue moving with the world. And that's how we're gonna do it.
Wow, those are some powerful words. I think also something that I'd like to share that I read a short while ago is that when you are curious enough to heal yourself, no matter what you've gone through, you are able to heal others around you. It's very interesting. I would like to ask Dr. Mutunga, as we wrap up, you've written a lot about the world you envision where everyone should have access to basic necessities and treated with equality, and like with, the FAF 20 theme, the vision of the world we desire. What are some of the opportunities that this pandemic has created for us to recreate the vision of the world we all live in?
Thank you, Pinky. My vision of the world is in the public domain. And I always start by quoting one of my favorite historians, Eric Hobsbawm, who says this about the world. He says, our world risks explosion and implosion, and it must change, okay? Powerful words. So how does the world change? What is my vision of the kind of planet, that I think we should struggle for? And I always say it's a planet that is just, because there's a lot of injustice in the world, just. It's also free. There are countries that are not free, whether it's Palestine, whether it's others. Freedom is very, very important for a lot of our people who are not free. And there are also people who are not free within their own countries. They are not occupied by external countries, but they are not free. Peaceful, our planet is not peaceful. It's not non-militaristic. So I yearn for a planet that is peaceful, non-militaristic, ecologically safe. We've been talking about this, for a long time. We live in a world that puts property, power, and profits, before people, and that's the cause of this planet that is ecologically unsafe. Okay, I also yearn for a planet that is egalitarian and equitable. Okay, because our planet has serious inequalities, and each country can talk about their own inequalities. When it comes to my own country, Oxfam says we have 8,300 billionaires and millionaires who own have as much assets as the rest of us. 46 million. And if you take the US, you take India, there are a lot of countries that you can look at, and the stark inequalities are just unacceptable, and they cannot be sustained. And that's where the possibility of violence and lack of peace, comes in. And the last thing that I see as important is that the planet must be prosperous. Okay, to be prosperous, resources have to be shared equitably, and the resources here we mean what we call the commons, thinking about land, water, etc., etc., and what we call public goods that we have been talking about here: education, health, the right to work, housing, food. So that's my my vision. And the pandemic, the question that you asked about the pandemic, in my view, it has enriched those discussions, because those discussions started. If we go back, it's when the Soviet Empire collapses in 1989, the Berlin Wall situation, and also 2008 when there's a serious financial meltdown, in the West. Okay, and there's a lot of writing going on about what is happening in China. Okay, because a system. So you were talking about people debating the systems that are called capitalism or neoliberalism and socialism. Okay, these debates have been there since the Second World War, and they continue. And the pandemic comes in. We have this pandemic, and the discussion is enriched because scholars, artists, everybody is looking for this world. Okay, we used to have the World Social Forum, whose clarion call was "another world is possible." So those discussions have been there, and with the pandemic, there are a lot of discussions. There are a lot of people. I like reading what this woman, Indian woman Arundhati Roy, writes about this situation, saying that we can't go back to the normal that the pandemic has completely interrupted. We need to think of, a new normal, and governments the world over are going to deal with this issue. Okay, they are going to deal with this issue And we might have a situation that happened in 1945 after the war, when Britain, for example, started what was called welfare capitalism, national insurance, employment benefits, etc. Until that ended in 75, the Europeans came up with their social democracy, social markets, as a way of mitigating serious issues, in the planet. So we might be coming back to, that era where concessions have to be made and a new world has to be created. Otherwise, if that doesn't happen, it will, as Eric Hobsbawm says, it will explode and implode. Thanks.
Wow, those are some very deep insights that we need to think about. I like how you talk about, that we're focused on property, power, and profits. And a lot of us maybe just shrug our shoulders and, we say, oh, this is not my problem. But in actuality, it really is, as a collective, we need to come together and maybe look at our actions and see how that the world can be a better place. Very quickly, Mr. Awar, I'd like to come to you, maybe 2 minutes of your closing remarks. Mr. Awar, I think your mic has been muted. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again. What I would like to say is that as government, we are doing our best to ensure that we give refugees who are within our borders the best that we can in collaboration with the UNHCR. And we want to make them as comfortable as possible. And even right now, we are developing a refugee policy, and it will be a policy that will give them almost equal rights like any other Kenyan. And all these we are doing, taking cognizance of the CRRF and the 1951 convention, and we are part of it. And we will ensure that as long as they are within our borders, we are going to give them the best. We will treat them like our brothers and sisters, and there will be no discrimination against any of them in terms of education, health provision, and any other help they might need at any given time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Awar. Ms. Ivana.
And maybe once again, finally, let me also thank the FilmAid for organizing this event. And let's hope that it will be an annual one so that we participate and encourage our youth to do what they can do best in terms of filming and all that, so that they also make a living out of these things.
Thank you so much. A very valid point there as well, Mr. Awar. Ms. Ivana, maybe you can give us a closing remark.
Yes, thank you, Pinky. I think I will be very brief. My message would be, this is not the time for the world to forget about solidarity, because there is really going to be a lot of losers of the pandemic. And clearly, that also includes refugees, who are the ones who are normally the ones who are most affected by the overall situation already. And as I said, it is in everybody's interest. It is in the interest of the world not to forget about those at the bottom. And so the solidarity, and I also believe, as Dr. Mutunga said, that the public sector, or the importance of the governance is going to grow after COVID, because I think the whole world has seen the importance of good governance. You can see the difference in the response in different countries according to the model of governance that they have, and how they have been applied their model of governance, which results it has yielded in despite the pandemic. So I'm a firm believer in also having been a public servant for most of my life, either for a government or for the UN. I'm a firm believer in good governance, and for me, the good governance means not forgetting those at the bottom. And I hope that the world will do that. That the world will not forget about those who are the most needy. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Backwatch, as we come to you, we'd like some closing remarks on what you are doing to create access of to life-saving information during this pandemic.
Yeah, sure. Like I've put it earlier on, like I do write. That's why I wrote the story of the girl, actually, who is able to help the needy, and she's also unable to reach out to do the mentorship programs due to the pandemic. As a media student, also as a filmmaker rather, we came up with some movies, short movies that were screened online here. There's one for Maria, which also talks about the pandemic and everything that it carries. So we are trying to pass out information to the communities that such things do exist, and despite the myths and misconceptions of the communities, this thing is real and it's global. So we are trying to pass out clear message through media that we were given the platform by FilmAid. Thank you, FilmAid, that we are now giving back to the community using the skills that we were taught. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Backwatch. Very quickly, Dr. Mutunga, there's a follow-up question that I'd like to end with. I don't know how quick you can answer it because we literally have 2 minutes. It is from Niall Gabriel in Kakuma, and he says, Dr. Mutunga, as someone who has worked in the Justice Department for a very long time, what mechanisms are in place to ensure refugees in Kenya can access justice directly from the Kenyan Justice Department when their rights are infringed?
Yeah, that's. I don't want to be specific, but you know, obviously our constitution does not discriminate against refugees and their access to justice. What I wanted to add is that there is something that we started in the judiciary, which we call the African justice systems. Okay, so the communities where the refugees are can access those systems. And I think in Kakuma, I remember there is a court, you know, there or close by. Okay, so our justice system is also for refugees as it is for Kenyans, but we also know that only 5% of Kenyans access formal justice, as it's called. You know, the 95% have this access justice in various forums. Elders, you know, faith leaders, etc. And that's why I think for Gabriel, I'm basically saying that that access is there at the formal level as well as informal level.
Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you so much to FilmAid Kenya. Remember, students gain skills in filmmaking, photography, journalism, radio, theater, music, and fine arts, and become equipped to lead responses to the issues within their own communities and promote creativity and self-expression. The film festival is going to be held in November, and this year's theme is Visions of the World We Desire. Once again, I'd like to say thank you so much to the FilmAid Kenya board member, Dr. Willie Mutunga, our UNHCR representative, Ivana Unluova. I'm so sorry, I've had a heavy tongue all day today that I've been mispronouncing your name. Our Senior Assistant Secretary of the Refugee Affairs Secretariat, Mr. Jashan Awar, thank you so much. And our FilmAid media student, Bapwatch Omot, thank you all so much for an incredible discussion. I really appreciate your time today. And we thank you to the community who joined us online. We hope you've enjoyed yourself and have a wonderful weekend. My name is Pinky Gilani. It has been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you.
We have positive things from refugee camp, like telling the world that this is who we are, and not everyone in a refugee camp can tell their story. So I feel great, like being a voice to the voiceless.
It's like that light in the morning when the sun rises. It shines a lot and it kind of like illuminates all of the area. So by telling one story, I'm able to shine a light on that person. That's what I love about telling a story. I kind of feel like I've brought someone from the dark and I've brought them to the light.
Meeting.